Hello, everybody. We are really happy to see such a full room. Great that so many of you turned up. So yeah, our panel discussion is the future of mobile apps, how they will look like in 5 to 10 years. And we thought it would be a great idea to first ask you guys before we start talking, if you think that it will change a lot in the next year. So if you think that mobile apps will be completely different in 5 years from now, please clap now. Okay, that was a bit timid, but still a little bit of participation. Yeah, so I would say like we start with the introduction round. I will just give around the microphone. And then you can tell your name, say what you're doing right now, and give a quick overview why you think your opinion matters in this discussion. And also, what is your opinion? How will the app ecosystem look like in 5 to 10 years from now? And just keep it really brief, like quick introduction, just elevator pitch, and then you can state your opinion of how it will look like in 5 to 10 years. All right?
Yeah, hello, my name is Thomas Reinsch. I work as a consultant at Acando GmbH, and my focus is front-end developing. And yeah, I think that both technologies, native apps and progressive web apps, can stay beside next to each other for the next years. And okay, Google, Microsoft and Apple, they running future technologies. I think it's going the way.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jörg Neumann. I'm developer or designer or something between this. I work also at Acando here in Hamburg at Millantor. Yeah, and I developed mobile apps for long years. I'm a native guy, so I don't really understand why PWAs are so a big thing, but I think we have a nice round and we'll find it out for myself. I hope so. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So hi, my name is Krystal, and I'm going to be moderating the session together with Chris. So my opinion doesn't matter.
It does. So my name is Alan Mendelevich. I'm from Vilnius, Lithuania. I run a Duplex, which is an ad network for Windows apps. I also help my friends at AIM Charts with data visualization content. So quick plug, come to my talk at 5 p.m. today about data visualization. And on the subject of app stores and PWAs, etc., I think there is no technical reason why web wouldn't win in 5 years, but I think that there are a lot of business reasons why this wouldn't happen, and that's my opinion for now.
Hi, my name is Thorsten Schaeff, but you can call me Thor. That's a bit easier. I'm a partner engineer for Stripe here in Europe. That means I work with some of the world's largest marketplaces and fast-growing startups and helping them, build compliant and delightful payment experiences for their customers. And I think that web browsers will be the app stores of the future.
Cool. So let's start by talking about the disadvantages or advantages of PWAs, right? So what would you say that PWAs still lag behind when we compare them to native web development? Maybe you can start, Helen.
Yeah, so obviously if performance is your main concern, then probably you can get more of it from native apps. Definitely you can get it, but that's I think that's not an issue for like 90% of the apps. Then like user experience, like 5 years ago, many people, especially UX fanatics, were like very concerned that web apps behave very differently from native apps. But I think, I don't know, from my experience, when I see normal people who are not techies, they really don't care if user experience is good enough. It's not as important if it's like 100% Apple or Google-like. If it works fine, it works fine. And then obviously access to the native APIs on the platforms, and that's, I think, this is a holy grail that Apple and Google will protect. Microsoft doesn't have much to lose, so they are not protecting it. You can get access to that today. You can get full access to anything that UWP, like native Windows app, can get access today from PWA if you put it through the store process. So as I said in the introduction, I don't see, if there is will from platform owners, there is no reason why it couldn't be like one-to-one parity between native and web for like 90% of the apps that don't have any specific requirements.
So no disadvantages from your side on the technical side?
Yeah, there are, as I mentioned, that there are right now, but I think most of them are either artificial or very short-term.
Yeah, I think kind of the two biggest I see at the moment, distribution, installation. If you for PWA applications, you kind of have this, it's kind of like a pop-up modal. And over the last 10 years, we've learned pop-ups are bad, right? Anyone you see kind of the cookie pop-up, you're like, no, close. So, kind of distribution installation, it is, very, the friction is high to actually install kind of a PWA application on your device. And if the user actually clicks, let's not install, there's really not much you can do to actually prompt them again. So that is kind of a big, friction point at the moment. And then secondly, authentication, right? You're very much used to, with native apps, to, kind of authenticate yourself with a fingerprint. There is, kind of the web authentication API in development, but it's very experimental still. So I think that are kind of the two big disadvantages at the moment.
Anybody else?
I think the question PWA versus native apps is only a technical issue, but I think the most important thing is the user and the user experience. So I look at this PWA thing about UI, UX, and user interface performance, touch performance, and I think this is more important than if I write my app with JavaScript or Swift or something like this. So, and a small commercial break. Thomas and we have a session tomorrow about Google Flutter, the world's best framework for develop native applications with JavaScript technology. Okay, end of commercial break.
Bold statement.
All right. So following up on this, like the idea of progressive web apps is actually not so new. So when you take a look back at the first iPhone, back then apps were basically just HTML websites. And like that was how they were envisioned by Steve Jobs or whoever at Apple in the beginning. So what does it take that maybe this vision comes back? So what would be the next steps that progressive web apps would be a full replacement of native apps? What do you think?
I don't believe this, because I think each technology will exist beside. Because complexity apps like games or something like this, or apps that needs sensoric or touch to the hardware or system, it's far away to use this for PWA.
Do we have somebody with a different opinion on this side?
But like you said, okay, there are like too many. Like, why isn't the full replacement possible? Like, the web is more dynamic than like native apps. So, what would need to happen that actually progressive web apps can be a full replacement? Like, everybody's talking about this. Like, yeah, they probably can and will replace native apps. But what do you think is the big difference? Why they have not done it yet?
I think a big point is the usage characteristic of the app. If you have an app with that mobilize a business process or something like that, so you have a lot of input and the usability is an important thing, then I think native apps are a better idea. But if you have an app that users don't use often, if you have an app that is mostly had read-only characteristics and you use it 5 or 6 times a day, then it doesn't matter if the user interface is fast and the animations are fluent and the touch behavior. But if you have an app where users must work the whole day with, it is important that the touch behavior is perfect, the animation, the user interface performance. This is a big point, I think. So I think PWAs are the next step in the evolution of mobile web, but not real apps. So this is my opinion.
But following up on that, like, okay, but you already nailed down the pain points now. You said already, yeah, the interaction is not as nice. There's maybe an input delay, and it's not so fluent and responsive like a native app. But if they would get it right, I mean, it's possible. It's just like technical limits right now, but they can be like improved in the next years. So if that would happen, then would you then be fine, like with that PWAs replace native apps? Or do you still see problems there?
I think it is possible, but not with the traditional web technologies. So HTML and CSS isn't enough in this space. So if you come to if you come to our talk tomorrow, we show Google Flutter, and the idea of this is, so you have a UI stack that is not HTML and CSS, and you have OpenGL support. So you can write it with Dart or JavaScript language, but also have a native performance and can compile it to native code, to ARM instructions. So then you have the web experience for developing apps, but have native performance.
Can I ask the audience, how many of you use Gmail? And how many of you use Outlook, like the desktop app? And which do you think performs better?
If you think Gmail is better, please clap.
Look, I have a lot of native background, but I don't think, like, on the desktop today, web technologies are basically indistinguishable if we want to be like modest and not jump and you know, attack someone for saying that they are worse. But let's say they are on the same page. If you use Slack, it's a web app, which eats a lot of memory, but it works fine. From the user experience perspective, it's totally fine for me, at least. I don't know. So I don't think there are any technical limitations. The thing that is limiting PWAs the most is distribution. We have a generation of people who are used to getting apps only from the app stores. So my daughter is 19, and I don't think she knows how to install an app from an installer or something like this, but she knows how to get an app from the app store, and that's her experience. And changing that would require some magic, which neither Apple nor I don't think Google is interested in. So like there are technical people at Google who are interested in PWA succeeding, but when it comes to like huge clash on the business side at the top, I don't know what would win if they would compromise on that.
But then following up on that, like then when user behavior changed and people stop using app stores and discover different methods how to discover apps, then this problem would be solved, right?
I think so, but I don't know how we get there.
I think I know. No, I think we're already seeing the beginning of that. You know, if you think about Chrome extensions, there is, you know, an app store. There's a marketplace for Chrome extensions, and I think that is eventually what we're going to see is, you know, browsers are going to offer a convenient way to actually install PWA applications. Yeah, but then the browsers are still again controlled by the big internet companies. So then that's true. That's a different question. Stuck in the same situation, basically. Maybe not for Firefox, but all the rest. Yes, but what's your point? Sorry. Yeah, but then like still you need the consent of the big internet corporations that already control the stores, that they want to shift it there. So it's still in their control. It's still not a really open web where you just discover like in a proxy network and not in a centralized place. Well, you know, the web is 80% Chrome. Is it really open?
That's also a problem.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's okay. It's hard to argue against, but yeah. But you, do you think that's even possible that user behavior changes in a way that people don't visit these centralized stores anymore, but I mean, they would still to discover use search engines, basically, which again, then still, I mean, you don't get out of the Google loophole.
Well, I think there's also the big piece of quality control, right? Like, you see that a lot on the internet. There's a lot of stuff out there, right? Like, it's a Frankenstein of technologies. And so, you know, the app stores are a place where, you know, there is quality control, there's reviews, there's rating, you know, there's a certain standard to adhere to. And I think that is actually an important function. Who should be executing that function? You know, that is a bigger question, yeah.
Okay, do you think it might be possible that like free marketplaces forms, like independent stores that are run on a more open technology?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the future will show, but I think for now, there's always going to be a central place where, you know, things where you go to experience things, search for things. I mean, look at Google, right? If you want to search something on the internet, you don't go to the internet, you go to Google.
Yeah, can't argue with that. Maybe let's move on to the next question, right?
Yeah, it's actually, I'd like to extend this a little bit. So now that we're talking about app stores and what sort of role do they play in the technology choice, what do you guys think that companies like Google or Apple or Microsoft are doing in terms of encouraging one technology and discouraging the other? And like, what do you feel that is going on right now?
I think the reason for the delay by Apple to support PWA is to monetize PWAs, and that's the problem actually. But next time, I don't know. how it could be.
Yeah, I think another point on this app store thing is trust. So I think trust is an important point. So today you have a lot of stores in the world, but you don't really want to install an app from a Russian app store or a Chinese one. Or have anyone installed an app from a Russian app store? Or okay, and Chinese? Another, okay. Yeah. And do you trust them? Okay. Okay. No? Okay. Yeah, that's my point.
Okay, so in terms of this trust thing, don't you think that the browsers interfering more in terms of how to show the user that you can trust a certain website or a certain web app, like what Google Chrome is doing by telling the user you should not trust this website because it's using HTTP instead of HTTPS, or this kind of thing? Do you think that if the browsers interfere more in terms of blocking unsafe web apps to the user, do you think that that could change?
Yeah, I think Apple is trying to do this. So if you write a PWA and want to have permissions for using the camera or something like that, so Apple said, okay, you can install your PWA from every store, but you don't get permissions. Or you install it from the Apple store, and then you can use, or you can get permissions on an iPhone. So this is one big thing I think in the future. The big vendors, I think the big vendors will try to claim PWAs to their stores because of the money they get.
Okay.
So what you described, as I understood it, this is exactly what Microsoft does right now. So if you build a PWA, you can publish it into the Microsoft Store, and then you can get access to everything like a native app gets. So that's their approach to this scenario. So their claim is that basically the role of the App Store is to have a relationship with the developer, so they know who the developer is, and then they can trust them with more permissions and stuff like that, which is kind of sort of impossible on the open web. So they approach it this way. I guess Google could do something similar, and Apple could do something similar. Again, it's a question of incentive for the other two.
Well, I think we do kind of have, we do have that standardization on the web, right? There's the W3C, there's more and more web standards and web APIs coming out, right? You're basically getting secure access to native phone functionality via new web standards. And yes, web standards take time. There's a lot of parties involved in this. But, what we're seeing there is the Bluetooth API coming to the web. There is web authentication API. There's payment requests API. So, all of these APIs that allow you to actually talk to, kind of native phone functionality and, implementing those in a secure manner in the browser, I think is a big piece to that.
Yeah, you as being the monetization expert, it was already mentioned before, right? That's a big problem because right now I think Apple is still getting 30% of all the sales in the App Store, and that would completely go away. So it's basically in their interest to keep it as it is. Would there be a different monetization option, technology-wise, that could be used for a distributed App Store?
I mean, in the end, if we're thinking about if the web browser is going to be, the App Store of the future, there's likely going to be a similar, monetization strategy to that. Yes, kind of in-app purchases, there is, up to 30% off cuts going to Apple and Google, and yeah, it's a big money machine at the same time, right? There is technology and infrastructure they put into this. So the question is, can there be a different monetization strategy? I don't have an answer to that. I mean, maybe, but I can't think of any alternative at the moment.
All right, then another questions we would like to ask you is, so more and more companies are switching to PWAs, so like Twitter, Alibaba, Forbes, Flipkart, they all have PWAs right now. And also we can in parallel see this big shift to away from native development and more to technologies like React Native and Dart, for example. So do you think that native development, like in Objective-C, Swift, Java, Kotlin, will stay relevant in the next 5 years? Maybe we go the other way around, because we always start here.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, we're seeing, for example, WebAssembly is actually, allowing you to bring in kind of native technologies and kind of very, very kind of heavy applications into the web platform. I think that's one component there. Sorry, what was the question?
Will native development stay relevant?
Yeah, I mean, for now, right, we've kind of looked at all the disadvantages, and there is still many of those, and right, kind of the big piece where we need to get to is kind of reduce friction for users, and right now, if we're kind of looking at the APIs and the support that we have, on kind of the native SDKs, it is a lot easier to provide a frictionless experience than it is today on the web. At the same time, there is kind of developer productivity. If you're building kind of on a central platform, you're gaining a lot of efficiency, and as kind of the standards evolve, I can definitely see that friction going away.
You don't.
I agree. Yeah. So basically, I think 5 years from now, definitely there will be still a lot of native development. 10 years, there'll still be native development, or probably less. I don't know. A few years ago, maybe even now, COBOL is still relevant for someone. So at some point, the scales shift to some direction, and maybe when we get into some form factor, if suddenly what it's called, Motion Leap or HoloLens become the main platforms, then again maybe it's gonna be very difficult to do it again with web technologies, and then native will go up in usage again, because phones are getting more powerful. There are less and less issues for general purpose average apps that are caused by using web technologies on the devices. So, but again, if we leap to some new generation of hardware paradigm, how we use computing, then maybe again we will have similar problems that we cannot solve with web technologies in the nearest future. And again, native will be king for some time, and then web will catch up. And
so it totally depends on the use case, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What about your opinion?
Yeah, I think cross-platform is more and more important. So every big vendor must face this issue. So if you look at Apple, they have Swift. Swift is a beautiful language, but I think no one really needs another object-oriented language. A language where you can only develop apps for one platform. This is my point. Google goes another way. Google have a Java for a long time, and but with Java, you don't have a cross-platform technology for every platform. No? So I think this web experience, so something like JavaScript, Dart, Angular, native script, React Native, Xamarin, or Flutter. I think something like that makes more sense in the future. Doesn't make sense for Apple, but makes sense for developers because of the productivity and the money that you must spend if you want to develop an app for the two major platforms. So I think there is a need, and Google do exactly this with Dart and with Flutter. So they have a technology where you can develop your app with Dart and can compile it natively on Android and on iOS. So Microsoft goes the same way with Xamarin, where you can develop with C#. But I think the JavaScript thing is more important. I think so. I think Flutter will win.
Okay, so now that we started talking about the developer experience, what's your opinion in terms of the developer experience and when you're comparing native development to PWA development in terms of tooling and debugging, and if it is frustrating or not, if the error messages are useful? So what do you think?
So in my opinion, like web's biggest strength is also its weakness. There is a lot of things, and there are a bit too many things, and they move at such a fast pace that developers just, you're developing an app, and by the end of it, it turns out that you developed with yesterday's technology because, there is a new kid in town, and whatever you did is like old school now. And when you need to update the app a year from now, no one knows. I don't want to insult any specific library, but library X that was very cool a year ago. We had that. We have this at work. We've developed our website. It works fine, but when we need to update it, no one wants to touch it because that library is like was cool 2 years ago, and now I've moved on to better places, and don't want to touch it. So with native, it's usually going more like iteratively and more predictably. So, Objective-C didn't change much in 20 years, just like you develop for iPhone with it now. C# has been around for 20 years, and all of the things are more mature and stable. And like, if you're a developer and you don't want to learn new stuff every day, you just want to be productive, probably you can still be that in native. But on the other hand, if you need to build the same app 4 times instead of 1, so maybe you are better off learning some web stuff and doing just 1 app.
Yeah, I think it also here it goes back to kind of, friction. How frictionless is the experience of developing apps for the different platforms? And, on the web, you have to basically support, every browser and every version of that browser. And so that very well. You want to use kind of a cool new feature, and it is available in Chrome or, Firefox as well. But then you kind of look at, can I use this? And then you see, none of the other browsers actually support it. Or, if you're building business applications and, you have a big customer base on Internet Explorer, you have to support that. And, there's more tools coming available, right? You kind of have Babel, you have Webpack, in order for you to actually build with the newest technologies and then, in a way, kind of compile it to support all the different browsers. And I think they're, developing on native is a lot frictionless today, where, it's kind of clear what is supported, where you're pretty much building for, kind of the two major platforms. There's not that much of a headache there.
Okay. Any one of you wants to answer this question? Like, what is the difference in developer experience? All right. I think we are officially out of questions from our list, right?
Well, and then since everyone kind of promoted their talk, I'll do that as well. So I'm actually speaking about, the payment requests API and how you can utilize that to get access to native, native mobile wallets like Apple Pay and Google Pay on the web platform. So that's tomorrow at 5 o'clock in Cinema 2. Grab a beer and join me.
Okay, so now we know each other's positions on the different topics. Is there anything that you would like to ask each other? Like specific things that you were talking about and really get into the details of the other person's opinion?
Since you have such a strong opinion about Flutter, just kind of want to challenge you on that. Looking at something like Go, another technology coming out of Google, kind of promising a lot of things, but it's not that big. How do you see that? How do you think, why will Flutter win in that space?
Yeah, I think this is a big point, and as I first saw this this Flutter thing, I think, do we need another framework? But then I read that Google is putting Flutter as a new app model for their new operating system called Fuchsia, I think. Yeah, Fuchsia or Fuchsia, or does anyone know who is? Wie wird es ausgesprochen? Weiß es einer? Fuchsia, so Fuchsia, Fuchsia. Okay, the next Android, the app model for the next Android is based on Dart and not on Java. And I have spent a lot of time writing dirty Java code in Android, and I hate the app model and the SDK from Android. So, and I have a lot of pain with on iOS with Objective-C. So this is the reason why I love Flutter. No Objective-C, no old Java shit and SDKs and APIs that are from 20 years ago. And so this is my point.
If you could get the same developer, it sounds like kind of your big point is the developer experience, right? Yeah. And efficiency. If you could get that same, experience on the web platform and actually get, kind of the same functionality and kind of quality and speed on web, would you build on the web then?
Yeah, I also build for web, but I think it's more important. It's more. You need more time for really cool stuff. So I have developed a big mobile app, a business mobile app, and the customer came with an agency, a design agency. They, I think the designer smoking pot or something like this, and make a fireworks UI stuff. So and say, hey, and you are the developer, huh? And you develop this every pixel of my fireworks. You develop it. So and then I must go into the details of the UI stack. and that this isn't fun. This isn't fun in on the Android platform. This isn't fun on the iOS platform, and that is also not really funny with HTML and CSS. And so I think we need a productive way to develop custom components and custom UI. So
how about React and Vue?
Yeah, yeah. React is a good point.
Web components coming as a standard.
I've developed great-looking web components, but web components are only the component model. You always need HTML, CSS, SVG, SVG, and something like this, and it's not easy going. This is my point.
Fair enough.
All right, so I like that it got a little bit heated up in the end here. Nice. So I think we have a couple of minutes left to take from the audience. Is there any question that you would like to ask or any point you would like to make? No one? You all agree? Okay. Okay. Sorry, didn't think about that.
My question is for companies that stop their own app development and just have now a online website. Do you think there's still a point of for them trying to go in the progressive web apps area to try it again to get a better user experience for their website? Or do you think progressive web apps are only an alternative for a normal app?
Who would like to answer that?
So I think progressive web app is just a fancy name for a well-built website. So, build your site right, and you have a progressive web app, and you're done, and you don't need to ask this question anymore.
Any other questions? Now that I'm here and I already made a little bit of exercise.
We have. I'm not really sure what apps are the target of the discussion, because if I look at Amazon or the Amazon web shop or the Google website or even other, if you are talking about applications for healthcare that are business applications, there is no need for an app shop for that, I think. So is the target of this talk is most basically the web apps like Angry Bird, or are you targeting other web applications?
So you are talking about there's a difference between business to customer or business to business applications, right? And you don't need the discoverability and business to business because they are being distributed by the developer anyway, right?
Yeah, it's like if you're talking about if you need a web an app shop, I for myself find it hard to find any usable apps in app shops because there's a lot of garbage in the app shops, in my opinion. But there are those mainstream apps that are relevant for the customers mostly, like messengers or the apps that someone else had that they told them that they also need. I don't think that most apps are really discovered by the app shop itself.
Someone wants to answer this? Okay.
So I think that discovery is like the main and the last function of app stores, and maybe simplifying transactions for those who need that. And for many like bigger and known businesses, app stores are mostly distraction than a value add. Like you said, if you know Amazon, you don't need to go to Apple App Store to find Amazon. But if you want to be the next Amazon, maybe you need the App Store to help you get there. So I think for all the examples that you mentioned, Amazon hates probably that app stores exist because they cannot make a proper Kindle app on iOS because they will tell, I don't know, did they resolve that or not? But for a long time you couldn't buy books in the Kindle app on the iOS because Apple wanted their 30%. I don't know if it's still the case. I'm not exactly sure. So, but the discovery part is probably a bigger thing for those who are either making an app, not actually a front end to their business, but an app that is the whole business.
Yeah, okay, that's the smaller applications, but not the business applications.
So I think for services that the majority of people use, they probably don't need the app stores except for transactions, which are probably still easier for people to do with Apple or Google than, you know, okay, Amazon is an exception, but for even for other smaller things that you are okay with using without an app store, you still would probably don't want to register with them and put your credit card into each of these apps, etc. So for users, that's probably easier still to do through the app store. But other than that, if you're a big business that people come to your website, you don't need the app store, but everyone else probably still does.
Well, I think in the end, it's always trade-offs, and you want to choose kind of the right technologies to provide the best, user experience to, whoever your user is. And I mean, we're incredibly lucky that we have, so many cool technologies to choose from. At the same time, it's a big pain point, but I'd say choose the right technology for what you're building. I know there's a lot out there, but yeah, that's a very open, answer in a sense.
In the beginning, we had the topic about the performance of PWAs or native apps, and from my experience, I mean, Twitter is using a PWA. I think performs very well. Amazon is basically just a web view, so it's also just web technology in a web view frame. And I discovered that a lot of apps I used or still use also use a web view, so you can see this in Chrome when you attach your Android phone. And some really looked and felt like native, but they actually were just a web view. So I think performance is not a big issue anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I also think, though, there's still kind of a lot of app exclusive features that are being built, and I think something like authentication is a lot easier on kind of native applications than it is on the web, for example. At least building kind of good authentication. So yeah, again, in the end, it comes down to what are the features that you want to offer, and then choose the right technologies. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so I would say we close with that. I think we had a really interesting discussions and took a lot of took a look at the different sides of each point. So really happy how it turned out, that we could really get everything in the into the big picture. And then I would say, yeah, thank you very much to you guys for joining and providing your opinion and having the discussion. And yeah, also like
Thank
everybody
you.
here. Thanks. And thank you very much.